I've always considered myself someone who appreciates peace. I don't look for fights. I don't meddle in other people's business. That's why, 10 years ago, I bought a small, tucked-away cabin up in the mountains. Not a fancy one. No lake view. No hot tub. Just quiet. Just solitude. It was my escape from everything: work stress, city noise, itchy newsletters stacked with passive-aggressive reminders. Up there, surrounded by tall pines and fresh air, I could breathe. The cabin sat just outside a small town that, over the years, began to grow. Nothing too crazy. A few coffee shops, glamping resort, and an influx of retirees who wanted mountain views without giving up their HOA-controlled lifestyles. That's when the trouble started. A small group of part-time residents, mostly seasonal folks from the city, formed what they called a mountain preservation community. Sounds innocent, right? But it was basically an informal HOA trying to act like a real one. They'd organize events, post reminders in people's mailboxes about paint colors and property upkeep, and worst of all, they had Karen. You know the type. Mid-50s, overly enthusiastic about rules no one voted for, clipboard always in hand, and a talent for inserting herself into situations that had absolutely nothing to do with her. Life had been hectic. Work took over. Family issues came up. I hadn't been to the cabin in almost a year. But I kept up with the property. I paid taxes, sent a groundskeeper to check on it monthly, and had motion-activated cameras set up along the tree line. I hadn't had any alerts, and everything seemed fine. So, when I finally carved out a long weekend to return, I expected silence. I wanted to chop wood, drink coffee on the deck, and do absolutely nothing. But the moment I pulled into my gravel driveway, I felt something was off. There was a wreath on the door. Not mine. A doormat that said, "Live, Laugh, Lake." Definitely not mine. And two brand new patio chairs sat on the porch, with matching pillows. I didn't own porch pillows. It felt like pulling up to someone else's Airbnb. I approached cautiously, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. The couch had been moved. There was a pair of women's sunglasses on the kitchen counter. Dishes sat drying on a rack I never used. A cozy throw blanket, pink and fluffy, was draped over my reading chair. Someone had been living here. My first thought was, burglary? But nothing was broken. Nothing was stolen. No sign of forced entry. Whoever had stayed here felt comfortable. Like they had a key. Like they believed they had the right. I started checking drawers. There were random personal items tucked away. Nothing valuable, just strange. A paperback romance novel. A bottle of essential oil. Someone's slippers under the bed. A water bottle left in the fridge. I grabbed my phone and started taking photos of everything. Then I heard the footsteps. I turned and saw her. Karen. Sun visor, yoga pants, a hydro flask clutched in one hand, and a look of pure indignation on her face. Me. Hi. Can I help you? Her. This cabin is private property. Me. I know. I own it. Her. That's not possible. This place has been empty for a year. I've been keeping an eye on it for the community. The community. I told her my name and showed her my ID. Told her I'd owned the place for years. That I was finally back. I even pulled up my deed on my phone. I keep it stored in the cloud for moments like this. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I don't know who you think you are, but I'm calling the cops." She stepped off the porch and dialed. Told the dispatcher she found a strange man inside an unoccupied home. Said I was claiming ownership and refusing to leave. I tried to speak, but she held up a finger and turned her back. I stood there, stunned. Minutes later, a sheriff's deputy arrived. Calm, professional, but clearly a little confused. Karen launched into her speech. Claimed she'd been maintaining the cabin for months. Said it looked abandoned. Even suggested it might have been foreclosed. Based on what, I still don't know. Then she dropped the bombshell. My friend has been staying here on weekends. She thought it was available. Excuse me? At that point, I invited the deputy inside and calmly showed him everything. My driver's license. Property tax receipts. The deed. Photos of the cabin from a year ago that matched the layout. And yes, My Wi-Fi camera logs showing motion triggers only starting after a specific weekend 2 months ago, right when someone first walked in. The deputy nodded and said, "Looks like it's yours." As the deputy escorted her off the property line, I could hear her switching tactics. Now she was claiming she was trying to keep squatters out. That I should be grateful someone was looking out for the place. That her good friend Jess meant no harm. I asked the deputy, "Is there anything I can do to make sure she doesn't come back?" He said I could file a trespass warning and press charges if anything went missing or was damaged. Then he asked if I wanted to. I looked back at Karen, standing next to her SUV, arms crossed, huffing like she was the victim. I smiled. Not yet, but I'd like it on record. That night, I locked every window, replaced the front door lock, and texted my groundskeeper to ask if he'd ever seen anyone there. He said he assumed I gave permission. I checked every room again and found a handwritten note in the nightstand. "Thanks for letting us use the place while it was empty." Karen said it was okay. That's when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. Karen let people stay in my cabin. And when I showed up, she tried to have me arrested for it. But if she thought that was the end of it, she had no idea who she was dealing with. After the sheriff left and I was finally alone in my own cabin, I sat on the couch, which, by the way, someone had rearranged, and just stared at the wall. I couldn't shake the image of Karen, standing smugly by her car, acting like I was the criminal. What really got under my skin wasn't just the intrusion. It was the entitlement. She knew it wasn't her property. She had no deed, no right, no claim, yet somehow, she felt justified. And now, with that note signed Jess and Mike, I had confirmation. Not only did Karen trespass and let herself into my cabin, she gave other people access to it. People I didn't know. People who had lived here like it was some sort of mountain Airbnb. The more I thought about it, the more obvious it became. This wasn't some innocent misunderstanding. This was a scam. I woke up early the next morning and made coffee, then started combing through everything. Camera logs, old maintenance invoices, and even neighborhood Facebook groups. Luckily, I'm the kind of guy who saves receipts. Here's what I pieced together. My groundskeeper visited monthly, but never went inside. Just yard and roof checks. My motion-activated trail cams had started recording activity 2 months ago. Strange vehicles, people coming and going on weekends. A woman matching Karen's build appeared in one clip, unlocking the front door with a key. Around that same time, the cabin Wi-Fi router had shown increased traffic. Someone was using it, and my utility records showed small spikes, hot water, lights, consistent with people staying overnight. They weren't just trespassing. They had moved in temporarily, on and off. That note said, Karen said it was okay. Which meant Karen had let them in. Which meant she either had a key or made one. And here's the kicker. I'd replaced the lock 3 years ago. Only 3 people had that key, me, my groundskeeper, who denied entering, and my ex, who hadn't been here since the breakup. Karen had to have used a locksmith. So now I was dealing with illegal entry, possible unlawful occupancy, and criminal mischief. I returned to town that morning and went straight to the sheriff's office. I explained everything to a deputy, not the one from before, and provided camera footage, the screenshots of the note, property documents, a printed log of Wi-Fi activity and utility usage. The deputy's eyebrows went up halfway through. "Wait," he said. "She told the officer she was just checking on a vacant house?" "Yeah," I said, "but her guests were leaving thank you notes." He smirked and started typing. He said they'd launch a formal investigation, but he warned me, unless I could prove something was stolen or damaged, it would likely stay a misdemeanor. But that was enough for now. I wanted it on record. And more importantly, I had a new plan. That night, I drafted an official notice of trespass. I had a lawyer friend back in the city, not cheap, but I owed him a favor, who helped me word it properly. It included a legal notice of my property ownership, a summary of the unauthorized access, names of known trespassers, Karen, Jess, Mike, warning that any future presence would result in legal action, a demand for written admission of entry or surrender of keys. I printed 4 copies and taped one inside the cabin, one on the front door, one on the porch wall, and I mailed the last one directly to Karen's address. Return receipt requested. But I wasn't done yet. I also filed a civil cease and desist notice with the county clerk. It wasn't legally binding, but it created a paper trail in the system. If Karen tried anything again, I would have an airtight record. And I wanted her to know it. A few days later, my phone buzzed. A known number. Voicemail transcript read, "This is Jessica. Please don't press charges." Karen said it was fine. "We had no idea you still use the cabin." I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to the sheriff's department and added it to my documentation. Then I got another call, this time from Karen herself. Her message was less apologetic. "Look, we didn't mean any harm. No one damaged anything. It's not a big deal. Why are you making this into a federal case?" I smiled when I heard that line, because now I knew she was nervous. And the best part? She didn't know what I had planned next. Remember the mountain preservation community Karen was always going on about? I decided to dig into them too. Turns out, they weren't registered as an HOA. Not legally. They had no authority, no board structure, and no legal framework. But they'd been acting like one, sending letters, organizing votes, and, in Karen's case, managing access to properties she didn't own. I found a few other cabin owners in the area who'd been annoyed with her too. One even said she caught Karen snooping behind her house, checking for code violations. Karen was a serial boundary crosser. But now she'd crossed a legal line. And the investigation was about to expose it all. Before leaving the cabin that weekend, I installed a brand new security system, one with live cloud monitoring, audio warnings, and license plate capture. If anyone stepped foot near my porch again, I'd get an alert. I was locking everything down. But as I packed up and got ready to head back to the city, I noticed a note tucked under my windshield wiper. Anonymous. But I knew exactly who it came from. "You're being watched too." No name. No signature. But I smiled anyway. I stood at the edge of the driveway, holding the anonymous note. "You're being watched too." Not signed. Not handwritten. Just printed in block letters, tucked under my wiper like a parking ticket. A weak attempt at intimidation, and a laughably late one at that. Because by this point, Karen wasn't the one watching anymore. She was the one being investigated. A week after I filed the trespassing complaint and mailed my cease and desist notice, I got a call from Deputy Marlowe, the same officer who brushed me off the day Karen called the cops. Only this time, his tone had changed. "Hey, Mr. Carter. Just wanted to update you on the case. We've confirmed unauthorized entry. Also, turns out the woman who called us, Karen, didn't mention that she had loaned the cabin to others." I let that hang in the air. "She didn't loan anything," I said. "She invaded a private residence." He cleared his throat. "We're putting it together now. There's also new information. Apparently, she might have received payment from the couple that stayed there." That caught my attention. She was renting out my cabin? We don't know that for sure yet, but that's the direction it's heading. I called a friend who worked in real estate fraud investigations. She helped me do a quick public search on rental platforms. Guess what I found? A temporary listing on a vacation rental site under the name JM Properties. Location matched my cabin. Photos matched the interior. Even the furniture matched, except it looked more staged. The listing had been active for 6 weekends, then disappeared. And the host? A generic email connected to none other than Karen's real estate license. I immediately forwarded everything to Deputy Marlowe. Screenshots, timestamps, archived page data, everything. It didn't matter that she had taken it down. The internet doesn't forget. And neither did I. With that evidence in hand, I went full throttle. I hired a real attorney, not my favored friend, and filed an official civil suit against Karen. Criminal trespass. Illegal short-term rental. False report to police. A loss of use of private property. And emotional distress. But I wasn't just doing it for me. I wanted to expose the pattern. So, I contacted a few other neighbors in the mountain area, folks who had complained about Karen before. 2 of them told me she'd entered their property to check on things while they were away. One of them had installed cameras. And yep, there she was on video, unlocking their back gate and walking around like she owned the place. Turns out, she'd made a hobby of pretending to manage vacation properties. She even claimed to be part of an HOA oversight committee, but as I discovered earlier, that committee was pure fiction. I handed all this over to the sheriff's department and filed an official report with the county prosecutor's office. Now she wasn't just looking at civil liability, she was facing criminal charges. Karen finally cracked. 2 weeks after I filed suit, I received a certified letter. To whom it may concern, I sincerely apologize for any confusion regarding the use of your property. I was under the impression the home had been abandoned and was not aware it was in active use. I acknowledge entering the premises and facilitating access by other parties. I will not return to the property under any circumstances. Please consider this my written admission and intent to cooperate with any proceedings. Signed, Karen M. Fielding. That was the golden ticket. My attorney took that letter and used it to push for a settlement offer. Karen, or her lawyer, offered me full reimbursement of utility and property use for the period she trespassed, a public apology letter, a non-disclosure clause, which I didn't agree to, and a check for $7,200 in damages. I didn't even cash it right away. Instead, I did one more thing. Remember that fake A Karen loved to invoke? I dug into the state code. Turns out, pretending to represent an HOA that doesn't legally exist, especially to rent out someone else's private property, qualifies as fraudulent misrepresentation under local law. So I filed a complaint with the state real estate board. And guess what? Karen's real estate license was suspended for 12 months pending review. Her little rental empire? Her self-appointed neighborhood queen role? Gone. And her social circle in the mountain community? Shattered. A few neighbors even told me they'd cut ties with her after learning what happened. I returned to the cabin one last time, not to fight, but to reclaim. I changed all the locks again, installed a reinforced steel door, and right above the doormat, I screwed in a metal sign. Private property. Owner monitored. Trespassers will be exposed. Underneath it in smaller letters. Smile, Karen. So to wrap this up, yes, Karen called the cops on me. Yes, she trespassed on my property. Yes, she tried to gaslight me and the sheriff into thinking I was the intruder. But in the end, I caught her. I exposed her. And I made sure she'll never set foot on my land again. Some people say revenge is a dish best served cold. But sometimes, it's best served with a lawsuit, a security camera, and a whole lot of receipts.